Well, good morning and welcome to the beautiful Damflask Reservoir just on the outskirts of Sheffield. And let me tell you, I've been waiting for this day for quite a while now. For those of you that don't know Damflask Reservoir, it's a compensation water for the Dom. So it fluctuates in depth throughout the year, and because of the dry summer we've had, it's very rare you see the dam level at what it is now. The last time it was like this was 4 years ago, and where we are now, we're on the quarry wall. This lake the reservoir is 115 acres. It's enormous, so you can imagine that massive amount of water is drained out of the reservoir in order to get to the level we're at now. And we're on the quarry wall, and what we're going to be doing today is something so unique. I don't think you'll ever experience the depths that I'm going to be fishing in today anywhere else in the country. It's literally 11 meters deep, 5 meters out, and it's like a billiard table right the way out. So my plan is today is to fish the pole in 11 meters of water and hopefully catch some skimmers and breams. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to run through the rigs that I'm going to be using, my baits, my feeding patterns, the ground baits, and just run through everything from start to finish. And hopefully we might have a great day's fishing as well. So let's crack on. So let's talk about the bait. It's quite simple. We're sticking to natural baits today, but Damflask is a fish meal based venue now. Over the years, it's amazing how the fish have really switched on to fish meal mixers, like many venues nowadays, many natural venues. So I'm keeping things simple, but what I've got to think about is the depth that I'm faced with. It's 11 meters deep, so I need to mix my ground bait up. Use the right ingredients, but mix it up correctly. So I actually mixed it up the night before. I want a really heavy, inert mix. That's ensuring that I'm getting a larger percentage of that bait getting delivered to the bottom third, which is where I'm hopefully going to be catching. So my mix today is the ever faithful black swim sim. I love this for all my natural work. Fish just love it. It blends perfectly with clear waters because of the colour of it. Nice dark ground bait, brown crumb. When it comes to skimmers, even on fish meal based waters, I always like to add a small percentage of brown crumb because all fish love it, along with the footprint, which is marine halibut. Heavy, dense mixer, adds weight, adds body, adds authority to your mix, and it's really important that when you're talking about the depths that we're fishing in. So mixed it up the night before, and you end up with, even with brown crumb and marine halibut that are quite pale, a light mix, you end up with quite a nice dark mix. Not black, but dark, and that's really important. And rich, nice scented ground bait as well. You can imagine in these depths, there's very little light there, so fish are relying upon scent. So that's the mix. That's the actual base mix that's quite dry, but the mix that I've mixed up for feeding, I'll show you in a minute. Particle baits. Quite simple. I have got some corn. I think corn's really important, especially in them depths, because I'd imagine that it'll be more visible for the fish. It'll be a nice holding bait. Adds weight to the ground bait as well. So when I'm feeding little nuggets of ground bait, which I'll talk to you in a bit, that's adding weight to those nuggets. A few micro pellets, not a lot, but I just think it's another good holding bait within your ground bait. Of course, we've got faithful chopped worms, and I've mixed the chopped worms into my ground bait already. I've got some left, but you can see they're quite coarse, not really fine. Everything's like stepped up a bit with this kind of depth. You've got to be a little bit more aggressive. So chopped worm, some casters for feeding. Don't think I'll be putting them on the hook. I think it's going to be maggots, and of course maggots, dead maggots, not live maggots, dead maggots. And you can see what I've done is, rather than freezing them down with all my maggot fishing, when I want dead maggots, I bag them up, buy a bag of maggots, fresh maggots, bag them up airtight, put them in the fridge for days on end, days. Literally, I can keep them in the fridge for 2-3 weeks, and they retain that lovely bright colour. They're durable, but they're also, because they've stretched out, quite big as well. And that's really important, because I want to try and get away with a big hook and 2 or 3 maggots on the hook. That's going to be my main bait because it's the most efficient bait to use in this kind of depth. So I'd imagine it's going to be worms or maggots that I'm going to be putting on the hook. And then my feed. So I've already mixed them up. So this is my feed. So you can see it's a lot wetter. So in here we've got casters, worms, maggots. I haven't added any corn yet. I'm going to. There's a little bit of corn there, a little grain there, but I'm going to add a few more grains of corn. But you can see it's absolutely packed with particle baits, and that's what you need in this depth. Because what you've got to imagine is, I reckon you're losing 50% of that bait on the descent. So you've got to compensate for that and really step up and be positive. So that's the feeding. Now at the start of the session, what I'm going to be doing is feeding maybe 6 balls of that size. But I'm going to pack them quite tight because I really do want to deliver them down and create that concentration of feed. But what is really important is I make sure that every single ball is very, very uniform in shape. Because of the depth that we're like looking at fishing in, I've got to think about the descent of that ball, and if it's misshaped, it could fall at a different angle to the rest of the balls. Uniform shape, uniform weight as well. Therefore, I'm going to create a tighter feeding table. So half a dozen of them, but it's not the actual initial feed that's important. It's what I do after that. So I'll be regularly feeding ground bait, little nuggets with a slightly wetter mix, so I can make them rock hard. They make the noises, particles coming off that mix, but at least there's a large percentage of those smaller nuggets getting down to the bottom where I want to get them fish feeding. So that is the mix, and that is my setup. So let's talk about rigs now. Right, let's talk about the most interesting part of the session is the rigs. Now, usually when you talk about rigs, you always start from the hook and work your way up to the float, but you'll understand why I need to do the opposite. So, let's talk about the elastic first of all. Deep water. So I'm using a hollow elastic. I'm using a MIDI reactor core elastic. I love it. It's actually my F1 elastic for the winter, what I'm using. So I say it's about an 8 to 10. But it's really, really forgiving. But it's got that power in the strike, which is really important to set that hook in this depth of water. So let's start with the journey. Okay, so this is the float. So this is, I've got 2 rigs set up. I've got I'll just show you one rig because they're very, very similar, just different weights. So I've got a sensor desk 4 gram. Now, what I love about these particular floats for deep water, and I used to use them a lot on the Vaughan Canal, which is quite deep. You know, it's a top 5.5, 6. They work so well because of that shoulder there. So you can imagine the amount of skim that there is on these deep waters. You've got that shoulder, you've got that body that you can really hold that float against water movement, create good bait presentation. Quite a long bristle as well, which is really important. You've got to take everything's got to be stepped up for deep fishing, including something as simple as your bristle. If your bristle's too short, the float's too near the surface and it bounces. So a longer bristle is really important for deep water fishing. Carbon stem, that minimises the weight of the float, especially when you're fishing long, deep rigs. The float, if it's too heavy, has a tendency to spin over the top kit or twist. Just makes the fishing really efficient and durable at the same time. So let's start moving down. Now, main line, I'm using 017 Aero Slick Silk. Brilliant line, great for shot as well. Just minimal damage when you're actually doing your rigs at home. You can slide whatever size shot you're putting on that line up and down, minimal abrasion. Brilliant line. Right, let's start working our way down. So, as I say, this is deep. And it is exactly 11 meters deep. I'll get there soon. Here we are. We're finally here. Just lay the pole down. Right, so this is the business end. So it's a 4 gram, this is, and my other rigs are 5 grams. So I've got a 3.5 gram Olivet, bulked together with shot, and then I'm double bulking with this rig. At this moment in time, like with all fishing, let's feel our way along, see what happens. But I'm going to start double bulking. Once I put that bait out, I want to deliver it down. And because of the depth, you can imagine that all the fish are descending down to the descent of the bait. They're not actually on the bottom. The only reason why they're there is because bait's there. So you're going to pick that bait up, then they're going to come back up. And that's why double bulking is really important for this style of fishing. So I would imagine 50 to 80% of my bites are going to be lift bites. So that is why I'm double bulking with 4 number 8s there. And that's going to really pronounce that indication on my float by lifting the bristle up out of the water, or my float actually not settling. So 0.17 all the way down, double bulked. Now the interesting thing is I'm using a 10-inch hook length. Now a lot of people might think, you know, 6-inch and 8-inch, but it doesn't marry with the depth that I'm fishing. So everything is stepped up. So it's a 10-inch hook length. I'm actually laying about that much line on the bottom, so my shot is that far off the bottom. So you can imagine when they pick the bait up, they're instantly going to lift that shot up and it's going to register. Down to an Acrylite 14 silverfish hook. These are brilliant hooks. I absolutely love them for my pole fishing and my feeder fishing on natural waters. They're an absolutely, I don't know whether Dave will be able to, we'll do another cutting, but really, really nice big hook. Nice and strong, stays sharp as well. And I like the gape on them, which blends with bunches of maggots, wormhead, bits of worm, sweet corn. It's just a universal hook pattern. So that is the rig. And as I say, there's nothing else to talk about apart from actually how to use it on the bank. It's very awkward depth, this 11 metres, for swinging fishing, swinging your rig out, presentation, and if the wind picks up, it's really hard work. But let's get fishing, let's get feeding a peg, fishing, and I'll run you through all the processes regarding the rig, the feeding, and hopefully catching a few fish as well. So let's get going. Right, let's get some bait out now. So 6 balls, not a lot of bait, because like I said, it's the process after the feeding that's really important. All them fish are way up in the higher columns, especially this time of year where the top column is still a lot warmer. So we've got to give them a reason to follow it down. So it's not necessarily about this bait that I'm going to be putting in now, it's what I do after that. So, and I don't have to be really, really accurate, but this is why I'm cupping it in. I'm cupping it in for 2 reasons. A, to be more accurate than balling it in. You can imagine if I'm balling it in, there's a very good chance that I'm spreading my bait too much because of the depth that I'm fishing in. You can imagine every ball that you throw in could fall at a different angle through the water. So A, I'm trying to create a bit more concentration with my feeding, but more importantly, for those of you that don't know Damflask, it's absolutely rigid with pike. And I honestly believe if I were to ball it in, I'm just going to induce the chance of more predators coming into a peg because of the noise factor. So I want to minimise the noise factor for now. And that is the reason why I'm cupping it in. 2 more balls. And I just hope that wind doesn't pick up. You know, it's all right now, it's manageable. It's amazing on these big waters, even fishing 11 metres out becomes very hard work if that wind picks up. And the beauty about this place is it's 11 metres deep, even at 4.5, 5 metres. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to feed some bait now at that distance, just in case the wind picks up and I can't hold my pole long. We've got, and this is another line I'm going to feed with little nuggets as well, just a bit more negatively. Just put a couple of balls out here, but you'd be amazed how much bait I'm going to actually get throughout the whole of the day, because I'm going to be constantly feeding my peg and, well, both my lines. So get to there. Number 6, 2 balls. Like I say, I'm just going to occasionally put a 1-hand squeeze there as well with the same mix in. and this is a problem with the depths that I'm fishing. It's a lot of messing around trying to use one pole, so I've managed to rummage together an old pole for a cupping pole. So I've now actually got 3 poles with 2 different rigs on and a cupping, so it saves a lot of time. And that's it, that's my feeding. So hopefully within a few minutes there'll be some fish over the top of that bait, and we're going to go in and get a fish a chuck. I'd imagine they're going to be small to start off with, and then gradually as the day progresses, more fish come into the peg. Hopefully the fish are going to get bigger. We might even catch some bream, so let's see what happens. Well, I fed my bait, and it's not taken long at all to get bites, but the interesting thing is I'm catching a small stamp of skimmers, and they are small. Look, at the end of the day, I've just got to keep going through the motions and catch fish. Now, I've plummeted up. I was fishing on the deck, but I couldn't get a bite. Not a bite. So I'm actually fishing about 6 inches off the bottom, double bulking it. But do you know what? If I lay 6, 8, 10 inches on the deck, where you'd think you'd be catching and that float would be just sliding under, I cannot get a bite. So I'm 6 inches off the bottom, double bulking it, and all the bites are lift bites. So I'm only catching small skimmers. I'll tell you what, I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. It's a little bit hard work with the depth that it is, and not necessarily because it's this deep. It's if it was half a metre shallower and I could get away fishing 11 metres as opposed to 13. As at the moment, I'm having to use this 13 metre section to swing the fish in, and I'm having to use quite a long lash because of the weight of the float. Because of the weight of the float, if I use a short lash, the float bounces and twists around the pole tip as I swing it. So I'm having to use a long lash to compensate for that, and that's why I'm having to land the fish with my 13 metre section. So what I'm doing is I'm guiding that Olivet right to where I want it to go, so it's all dropping in line on my bait, which is at 11 metres where I fed my peg. And then when I hook a fish, I'm having to ship up to 13 metres to swing him in. And as you can see, there's a few fish there. Like I say, they're only small, but I tell you what, I'm absolutely loving it. And I'm just hoping if I just carry on with this, I'll get an arrival of some decent skimmers sooner or later. I would have thought it'd have happened by now, to be honest with you, but like I said to you, the problem with these places is they don't get fed. And who's going to come along here and fish in this depth with a pole or a feeder? Very, very rarely will you see somebody on this point fishing. So you just got to keep going through the motions. As I say, I've fed 6 balls. I've been feeding one-hand squeezers, and I'm just squeezing a ball now, just making it rock solid, just so it delivers down near the bottom. Of course, I don't want it to cloud up because I don't want them fish to come any higher than inches from the bottom, because you lose touch with your peg then. And what I'm hoping is that when the skimmers do arrive, I'm at the depth where I'm going to catch them. But as soon as I start coming higher off the bottom, that's when I'm going to incur problems. But the stamp of the fish are just a little bit too small. But like I say, I've just got to keep going through motions. And definitely a 5 gram rig is working loads better than the 4 gram. If it was a little bit calmer, then a 4 gram would be better, I think. I've not mixed my ground bait up sloppy. I've mixed it up quite dry so I can bind it quite hard. I don't want to create that cloud which is going to invite fish to come up. I'm trying to deliver bait to the bottom but at the same time keep them interested. And it's amazing really. I know they're only small fish, but once the peg does get going properly, hopefully I'll catch a better stamp size, fingers crossed. That's if the wind doesn't pick up. And give myself a chance of catching them better skimmers as well. I mean, it's hard work, but hey, what's this? I know what this is. That was a better fish, and Peter the Pikes took it. That was a better fish, and I think this could be quite enjoyable. This, couldn't it? It's definitely not a bream. Yeah, when the float went, I could tell straight away it was a better fish. I don't mean like a 2 or 3 pound bream. They haven't arrived yet. You'll know when they're here. But these pike, they know what fish to grab. It's definitely not what I expected. But when I go out with Dave Wesson, anything happens. Literally. If somebody said to me, "You're going to fall in today, you're going to lose all your tackle," would not surprise me at all if I'm with Dave. I tell you what, this is a big fish. This is a big fish. I can hear lines singing in the wind. This is massive. I could have a cup of tea. That is a big fish, that. Is it coming? Is it coming? This is playing a nice little tune now, isn't it? Oh, he wants to go deeper. Well, I tell you what, that's ridiculous, that. That is ridiculous. I'm using 010 fluorocarbon, and it just goes to show how strong that line is, because I'm playing it as if I've got a carp on. Oh, he's let it go. Has he let it go? He hasn't all. Oh my God, look at that. It just goes to show what do I know? I thought that were a better skimmer. It's a bloody perch. That isn't too... You're not happy, mate, are you? You are not a happy chappy. Yes, that was not a happy perch. But I tell you what, that was definitely a big pike. A big pike. And it's amazing to just sit there in your peg waiting. Maybe that's why the big skimmers aren't moving in, I don't know, but let's see what happens. Let's see what happens now. I'll tell you what I am going to do. I'm actually fishing quite a long lash. And see if I can shorten it right down, but like I said, the problem is the weight of the float. The weight of the float causes the float to wrap around the pole tip, and then if you're trying to get a weight of these fish, oh, it's Richard the Rudd. Just makes your fishing inefficient if you're constantly having to unwrap the pole float from around the end of the unwrap the pole float from around the end of the pole. I'm catching everything today apart from what I've come for, which is big skimmers. but we must try. Carry on. So what I'm doing is I'm swinging the Olivet downstream, down the peg, dragging it up, bringing the float up, and then folding the float over, which is creating an S-bend in the line. I'm now holding the pole in the area where I fed my peg. See how it straightens up there? Now everything's locked up, lower the rig down, and you fish in. And in that depth, considering how deep it is, that's quite quick fishing. But it's about where you place that Olivet. So you've got to place your Olivet downstream and drag it back up so you know it's more or less bang over the top of where you've fed your peg. And I'm using quite a big hook, as you can see, for this reason, that if I'm catching these small fish, I want a hook with authority so I can swing them in confidently and less chance of actually pulling out a fish on the swing, which can cause big problems with the rig. So the Olivet downstream, dragging it up and folding the float over the top. Hold the float above the water. Just going to feed a little nugget of ground bait again. I am actually going to top up another big ball in a minute. The thing is, what you're going to consider is, because of the depth that we're fishing in, as expected, the amount of bait that I need to feed, just to give myself a chance of catching some better fish, drawing some better fish in. It's unbelievable what you need to feed. But I tell you what, regardless of the size of the fish, this is awesome. This is great. I wouldn't say I'd enjoy doing it every day, because I'd have arms like Arnold Schwarzenegger, wouldn't I, after a week of doing this? But like Iron Man. Right, let's try single maggot, just out of curiosity. Now, like I said to you, I've actually fed some bait at 6 meters where it's exactly the same depth, just in case that wind picks up. I'm hoping that wind doesn't pick up and I can just concentrate on one line. Now the skimmers are small, which is telling me, well, I do need to feed the peg, but that's all that's in the peg feeding at the moment. Now the interesting thing is, like I say, I've laid quite a bit of line on the bottom, trying to catch. The bait's there, the bait's on the bottom, the fish are there, they're bound to be on the taking bait off the bottom, but I cannot get a bite on the deck at this moment in time. They were all lift bites, and this is why this double bolt rig is so important. Speeds up that process of straightening the rig up and seeing those indications. Well, we're coming into the, I don't know, last hour and a half of the session, so to speak. And I tell you what's been so interesting. Let's talk about what I fed in my peg. I've fed worms, casters, maggots, sweet corn, pellets, and the only bait I can catch on, and it's like night and day, the only bait I can catch on is maggots. And I'm catching small skimmers on a regular basis with double maggot, but they're only small. But I tell you what, lovely fishing, really enjoying it. I've rejigged my rig a little bit But before I talk about that, let's talk about what the skimmers. Every other bait I've put on the hook that you'd think would really work, like casters, wormhead, sweet corn, even sweet corn in this depth, I cannot get a bite on. And there are a lot of skimmers down there, but they're all peas in a pod. They're all the same size. They're like the size I've just caught. I've had one better skimmer, about, I don't know, 6 ounce, and I've fed a lot of bait today. I won't say you can't get through them. That's all I can catch, and that's all that seems to be present in the peg. And I'll tell you what, I'm really enjoying it, but I'm just hoping that an arrival of better skimmers arrives maybe as the light starts to drop. It sounds a bit weird, that, because in the depth I'm fishing, 11 metres, there can't be any light or very little light down there. But maybe that might make a difference in the latter stages of the day when, that seemed a better fish. But I tell you what, I'm really enjoying it, but I really did come here expecting to catch skimmers and bream. And it is literally absolutely black with little skimmers. Ridiculous amount of little skimmers in there. And it's just a case where you just got to go through the motions and just keep putting them in the net. So what I've done is I've rejigged my rig a little bit, and I'm fishing. Now the wind's died down, I've shortened the line right off because it was so awkward fishing 11 metres deep with a 13 metre pole and a long lash, having to put another section on to swing the fish in. But now the wind's calmed down and it's manageable. I'm fishing a really short lash now, which enables me to swing it out like so. Still doing the S-bend with the line. And it's just so comfortable, so efficient, so quick. And I can swing everything to hand and nice and comfortable. With that extra section going to that 13 metre section, it's really, really hard work. And obviously if I was like ligging a bit of line on the bottom and catching bream, fishing a longer lash, then I would be fishing the 13 metre section with a longer length of line between the pole tip and the float. But it's just so evident to see that all the bites are on the drop or off the bottom. So I'm just plugging away, and hopefully it's not happened yet. And to be honest with you, if it was going to happen, it would have happened by now, where I'd have hooked the odd bream. It's just not happened at all. Just keep going and see what happens. I'm really enjoying it, to be honest with you. And you just don't know what you're going to hook. I've had a bit of pike problems. I've had 2 pike on. I tell you what, one of them, I played it for ages and it was massive. Never saw it. Hugged the bottom for must have been at least 5 minutes. Finally got it near to the surface, and then it's done me on the rocks. God knows how big that was. And that's not done my peg much good, to be honest with you. As a matter of fact, it's gone a little bit quiet now. But just got to keep going through the motions. Oh, this is a better fish. Not much better. Don't think it's a swinger. I'll just take a section off. Yeah, can't swing that. Yeah, maybe the better ones are coming now, I don't know. But this was the size I really did expect to catch. The smallest size. 8 ounce, lovely fish. And I was expecting to catch these at the start and then the big ones to arrive. But this has actually been a bonus fish today. This is the thing, when it's this depth of water, it's really hard to say what depth them fish are at. They might not want to go anywhere near the bottom, and yes, they could be actually in my peg, the bream, but reluctant to follow the bait down. And I have fed a lot of bait. I've gone through 3 pints of casters, half a kilo of worm, 2 pints of pellets, quite a large amount of ground bait. So it's not the lack of bait that's stopping the skimmers feeding. That is a fact. And you can see, as soon as that wind picks up, it makes this style of fishing very hard work. Very hard work. What I am going to do, just out of curiosity, is just try that lighter rig in a minute, just to see if it makes any difference. It's really important with this style of fishing that you constantly feed. It's not just thinking, oh, I'll put 15 balls out or whatever. I put 6 balls out at the start, but I fed a lot of ground bait after that. It's not just a case of setting a trap and thinking, waiting for them to come. You've constantly got to keep putting bait out. And that's what I've been doing all day. And it's made no difference. They're the stamp you I'd like to be catching all the time. I'll tell you what, this way of fishing is so unique. I'm not really bothered if I don't catch any bream. I'm just enjoying it so much. Up a beautiful venue, peace and quiet, loads of bites. What more can you ask for? Well, what a lovely day's fishing. Look, we've not caught any bream, we've not caught the size of the fish that we actually come to catch, but I've absolutely loved it. A, because of the depth of the water that we've fished in, but just loads of bites. I've just an unbelievable day's fishing, catching these beautiful little skimmers, the odd little rudd, in a very unique environment. So I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you do and you are faced with those kind of depths, then I hope you can put that information to use on your next time out on a deep venue. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe the Match Fishing YouTube channel.